So really, to understand this question of origins, you really need to begin by looking at the governing paradigms, the two major views that we currently have about the history of life and the history of the universe.
And what are those?
On the one hand, we have the conventional paradigm. This is the view that the universe began a long time ago in a very simple state, and by strictly physical processes developed gradually and continuously into all the complexity that we see today. Galaxies, stars, planets, cells, animals, human beings. It's one long continuous story from a very simple beginning to today. That's one view. The second view we can call, let's say, the historical Genesis paradigm. Strikingly different. First of all, you've got recency. Right? This is not happening over a very long time. It's happening relatively recently, and it begins in a state of functionality where it's working already. You've got organisms present, they're doing what they need to do. You've got planets and solar systems already operating, brought into existence, really within a very short span of time, simultaneously. Homo sapiens is present right there, right at the start. So those two views contrast really at every point, and their key features are also very different.
It's not hard to see there's a radical difference between those two in terms of time. Right. What else do you see is contrasted here between these two paradigms?
To me, the most striking difference is what kinds of causes are operating. So in the conventional paradigm, it's physics running the show. Physics through chemistry, influencing biochemistry and then biology. All the change that's happening is coming bottom up from fundamental, undirected, mindless physical processes. They're doing everything. In the historical Genesis view, underlying everything is mind, is intellect. A purposeful intelligence is bringing things into existence. That's a profound difference. Another key difference is the actual sequence of events. So in the conventional paradigm, you have a gradual process whereby things are constructed beginning on what came before. So ultimately, really you start with, elementary particles, hydrogen and helium, the heavier elements, galaxies are formed, planets, and so forth, leading eventually to the first cell. It's a continual process of gradual transformation. With the historical Genesis paradigm, you have a transcendent intelligence, God acting in space and time to bring things into existence, in a sense, discontinuously. And that pattern gives you discrete events in space and time that aren't strictly flowing one from the other. So you have the creation, you have the fall, which is a catastrophic event that affects all of the creation in a radical way. So again, you see a striking difference in the narrative that one would tell depending on your starting point. And lastly, and maybe this is the most important, what is the whole of reality? Is it strictly physical? Are we, meat machines that will decay into nothing upon our death, or is there a spiritual dimension to our existence that is eternal, that has eternal value? And really, that final point is the one I think that's most decisive, because it ends up affecting how we treat each other. And science is one thing, but our moral sense, our relationship with God, we can't have a relationship with God if we are strictly physical creatures. So finally, on that fourth point, you see the deepest difference between these two paradigms.
Well, Paul, what we've described here are two paradigms that really have very little similarity. They are almost light years, if you want to use the phrase, light years apart. And it seems to me that the result of that is also radically different in terms of how I see myself.
Exactly.
Who am I? All of those philosophical questions, right? Why am I here? What's the purpose of life? Is there any meaning in all of this?
Right.
And the paradigm that begins with natural processes and ends with natural processes it's hard to find meaning.
It's hard to find meaning. In fact, the very concept of a deeper meaning, a deeper purpose, has no purchase in that view. Because if you're ultimately particles in motion, when your particular bag of particles ceases to be in motion, it's over, right? That is not the view of historical Genesis, where you are created, yes, as a physical object, but there is more to you than just your particles. In fact, there's infinitely more. And so, really, the difference ramifies out into every aspect of human life, which is why this question of origins is so important. It's not just a scientific matter. It's not just a scientific debate.
But it seems to me that the evidence that we have here is available to both of these paradigms if you just look at the physical evidence.
The physical evidence is a common body of data that both views draw on and interpret, but they're taking from that common body of evidence very different meanings. They're going in very different directions. It's a bit like having a crime scene where you've got two detectives and they've got the same patterns, right? One guy says it's this, the other says it's that. They're going in quite different directions away from the same body of data.
And it seems that they're going in different directions because one paradigm is listening to a witness telling you the story of what happened,
Yeah, I like that.
versus the other one who's just looking at the physical data.
Right.
Because isn't that what we have in the historical Genesis paradigm?
We have a witness to those events, and that witness is telling us this is what happened, and we have to take that into consideration when we evaluate the data. When you've got a witness present, it's going to affect how you read the evidence that's available. And I think if we zoom out from that and say, well, what really is the difference between these two paradigms? It isn't a question of science on the one hand versus religion on the other, because both of them are scientific in the sense of looking at a common body of data. Really, at the deepest level, the difference is two competing views of history. What is the true history of our cosmos? And in that light, I think it makes a lot more sense to look at them as paradigms that draw on different accounts of history with different implications.